Thank you, Kevin. When I was a parliamentarian, you were a beacon of light for all of us, and demonstrating transparency and accountability is all about helping to shine the spotlight on democracy and that accountability within it. So we are in your debt, those of us from whatever party we happen to represent during your tenure at the time. Jacques, Vraiment, I can only say I was one of the beneficiaries as a communauté Québécois of your tenure as the head of the Quebec Human Rights Commission. Et nous étions fiers de votre engagement et de votre leadership. Merci, Jacques. And High Commissioner, representatives from Mahatma Gandhi Society, you have inspired us. We come together really at an important moment of remembrance and reminder on the occasion of the 150th anniversary, the birth of Mahatma Gandhi, which is taking place at a time that we have a democratic festival in India, as you put it, and where South Africa has just concluded its elections. When one thinks the long road of apartheid to now get another heroic struggle, and of course Indigenous people who are struggling here in Canada for their proper representation in the Canadian democratic polity. So I'm delighted to welcome you to this forum on democracy, really featuring the non-violent struggles for recognition, as I have mentioned, and the techniques used to achieve democratization and the lessons to be learned from it. And in particular, the heroes who have waged this battle, who are our panelists this evening. This forum, as I mentioned, comes together at an important moment of remembrance and reminder, but could not have come at a more propitious time in the struggles for democracy. About 2 years ago, a group of human rights activists, scholars, public intellectuals gathered together to sign the Prague Declaration for Democratic Renewal, whose theme was, and I quote, "Liberal democracy is under threat, and all who cherish it must come to its defense." Since then, these threats have not only not abated, but have intensified. They include, and they were referenced in the Prague Declaration at the time, but as I said, they have actually worsened since then. A growing resurgent authoritarianism, which is not only suppressing its own people at home, but indeed threatening democracies and democracy abroad. An authoritarian disinformation, the weaponization of social media, which is further undermining democracy's democratic institutions and democratic values. The volatility of transition from democracies to, in fact, authoritarian countries. We see this in the case of Venezuela, in the case of Turkey. The threats to democracy from within, as witnessed in the illiberalism on the rise in Hungary, the Philippines, and other backsliding democracy. And in other countries, even long-established democracies, support for democracy, for its institutions, for its values, is increasingly eroded as democracies themselves face new challenges and increasing challenges of globalization, inequality, and anti-immigrant ethos, xenophobia, hate speech, as Jacques has mentioned, political processes that appear increasingly to be sclerotic and dysfunctional, terrorist violence that creates a climate of fear used by despots and demagogues to justify further restrictions on freedoms. All of it coming together, and I'll use the closing words of the Prague Declaration, which said, quote, collectively, these factors, the geopolitical retreat of the West, the resurgence of authoritarian political forces, the erosion of belief in democratic values, and the loss of faith in the efficacy of democratic institutions have brought a historic halt to democratic progress and threaten a possible reverse wave, as they put it, of democratic breakdowns. Democracy supporters, as they put it, must unite to halt the retreat and to organize a new coalition for its moral, intellectual, and political renewal. Fortunately, we have this evening with us, as I mentioned, a group of indomitable warriors for democracy who have come together and who have led the struggle for nonviolent movements in South Africa, in India, and in Canada. Movements that have sought not only to bring about democracy, as in the case of South Africa, or to give democratic protection to its indigenous founders, as in the case of Canada, but to realize democracy for its people, as in the case of India. And in respect of each, different tools, different resources have been used in that democratic, nonviolent struggle. Our three panelists this evening are Dr. Cindy Blackstock, the Executive Director of the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society, herself a member of the Gitskan First Nation, a professor of social work at McGill University, and an internationally recognized authority on Indigenous issues. And I'm delighted not only to welcome you here, Cindy, but you have been as you have been described as Canada's relentless moral voice for First Nations equality. Irwin has dedicated his life to political activism and advocacy. He was at the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement and was a political prisoner in South Africa for 15 years. He was together with Nelson Mandela on Robben Island. I might tell you, Ibrahim, that we recently, I say we in Canada, last November, inaugurated the Nelson Mandela Lectureship in Human Rights in remembrance and in tribute to Nelson Mandela, who demonstrated how one person could endure 27 years in a South African prison and yet emerge to preside over and lead us into a democratic, non-racial, egalitarian South Africa. And you were an important part of that struggle, Ibrahim. You went on to become the Deputy Foreign Minister of South Africa, which is in the capacity that I met you there, Chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, be a Member of Parliament, and we welcome you here and look forward to your insights as well this evening. Professor Rajmohan Gandhi is a distinguished professor at the University of Illinois Center for South Asian and Middle Eastern Studies, recently completed a mammoth work on a study of South Asia. And through his involvement with initiatives for change, Dr. Gandhi dedicated really over half a century of his life towards the struggle for reconciliation, democracy, trust building, and the like. And the important battle, which is at this point undermining democracies today, and that is the struggle against corruption and inequality. If I may say parenthetically, and I hope not presumptively, Professor Gandhi, when I was a child growing up, as my parents of blessed memory would tell you, they nicknamed me Mahatma Gandhi. That's what I was called the first years of my life. Before I understood the greatness of Mahatma Gandhi, the reason because I was a very skinny little boy who was always talking about peace. And so they named me Mahatma Gandhi, and as I grew older, I realized, that that was the most important accolade that anyone could ever have given me. So we welcome you here this evening amongst us. So may I, in the first round of questions, and I'll be joining you after I put the question to each of you, if you can, to share briefly the essence of your struggle. In other words, what strategies, what resources did you call upon to seek to achieve your democratic goals? And if we could begin with you, Cindy, and we'll just go through.
So first of all,